In Big Brother, winning the Power of Veto can be a total blessing for your game. Not only does it keep you safe for the week, but you also have the ability to save one of the two players in direct danger. However, you don't have to use it. If you look at the situation and think that keeping the nominations the same is the best for your game, you can choose to not use the veto and leave things as they are. But sometimes, that completely ruins your game. Throughout Big Brother history, there have been a handful of times where someone should have used the veto after winning it, but they played it safe and didn't. Sometimes it was an obvious misstep, other times it was less obvious, but one thing's for certain. All 5 of these veto holds led to the veto winner's eventual demise. Consider subscribing if you're new here, and without further ado, here are the 5 worst veto holds in all of Big Brother.
As harsh and as terrible as it is, you should have used the veto. I'm sorry, but I vote to evict you, Marcellas.
Up first, we have a veto hold that really cemented the downfall of a specific player, and that's when Paulie did not use the veto to save Zakiyah at the final 10 of Big Brother 18. Throughout the pre-jury stage of the game, Paulie was basically running the show, and he had just joined an all-guys alliance. Things were looking particularly good when Victor, one of Paulie's new allies, won the HOH, and he nominated 2 of the women on the other side, Michelle and Zakiyah. The boys originally wanted Zakiyah gone, but Paulie had other things in mind. You see, Zakiyah was Paulie's showmance, and even though Paulie gave the boys his blessing to target Zakiyah, he felt confident that he could eventually get his way and get rid of Michelle instead. Paul and Victor didn't want to do this, but it seemed like their hands were tied once Paulie went out and won the veto. What better way is there to, keep your showman safe that's on the block and potentially going home than by using the veto on her? Paulie had the opportunity in front of him, and he even told Zakiyah beforehand that he would use the veto to protect her, but he wanted to show some good faith to his boys' alliance, and he chose not to use the veto, and he kept the nominations the same. Paulie had a backup plan to use a power that James had won in order to cancel 2 eviction votes, which would give Paulie the numbers to evict Michelle anyways, but that's not what ended up happening. Paulie's behavior in the house had not been great, especially around this time, and it sparked a revolution where Natalie was able to flip James against Paulie and turn the tides against him. So, instead of helping Paulie, James actually used his power against Paulie to send Zakiyah home, and Paulie was evicted just a week later because he lost all of his numbers. Paulie didn't realize it at the time, but the house was going to turn against him, and he needed every ally in his corner that he could get. Zakiyah was a crucial number for him, and he needed to keep her in the house, but he didn't use the veto and left her on the block, which led to her being evicted. Had Paulie used the veto to save her, that would have given him 3 strong and loyal allies in Corey, Nicole, and Zakiyah, and he could have had a chance to regain control of the house. But he didn't, and he was evicted because of it.
Should I be panicking?
I wouldn't panic. The only time to panic is after the veto if you're still sitting there. If you get a chance, you can pick me.
You take me down.
Yeah, I'll take you down.
Congratulations, Paulie. You have won the golden power of veto.
Having the veto this week is great. It's a big decision with Zakiyah being on the block. If I pull her down, I upset a couple guys in my alliance. If I leave her up there, I risk her going home.
I have decided not to use the power of veto.
I feel pretty good not using the veto. I don't want to upset anybody in my alliance. I trust James to make sure that no one votes for Zakiyah and everyone votes for Michelle.
Night, Natalie. You and Michelle have fun in there, and she'll be going home tomorrow, and you'll shortly be next. You're about as fake as the things on your chest.
James, are you voting to evict Michelle?
I'm voting to evict Zakiyah. I'm clipping your girl. And Zakiyah is gone. I'm standing behind my girl. That's a Texas code.
By a vote of 3-2, Zakiyah, you are evicted from the Big Brother house.
Yeah, I wish he could have pulled me off when he won the veto, but, it is what it is.
Paulie, you are evicted from the Big Brother house. Let's talk about Zakiyah.
When she was evicted, I did feel for that. I kind of felt like it was partially my fault.
Up next, we have, without a doubt, one of the worst veto holds ever, but one that I am forever thankful for. And that's when Jessica chose not to use the veto on her own HOH with Ramses and Josh on the block at the final 13 of Big Brother 19. Jessica was in a terrible position in the game, but everything started turning around for her all at once. She just received a game-changing power to cancel an eviction vote in the coming weeks. Her showman's Cody had just re-entered the house, and to top it all off, she won the final 13 HOH. This was a key moment for her to try and take a huge shot at Paul's power structure, but knowing that she didn't have any numbers in the house, she played the week more passively and tried to buy her and Cody an extra week or two by not rocking the boat too hard and targeting someone that didn't seem too powerful and someone she viewed as expendable in the house: Josh. However, instead of nominating Josh next to anyone that Paul would be incentivized to keep, Jessica chose to nominate Ramses as the pawn. Ramses was pretty much the only person left in the house that was fully willing to work with Jess and Cody long term. And on top of that, Ramses was openly a neutral player in the house, meaning that Paul would have every reason to try and vote him out, but Jessica still decided to nominate him anyways. This was already a pretty big misstep, but she had the opportunity to right her wrong once she won the veto. Ramses spoke with Jessica and voiced his concerns about how he thought the votes were going to be flipped onto him, and he was totally correct with this read. Jessica, wanting to make sure that the votes remained on Josh, asked Raven to confirm the plan that Josh was still the target. And when I say that Raven gave the least convincing lie of all time, I mean it. Raven was so bad at actually convincing Jessica that the vote was still on Josh, and it alerted Jessica that things were probably not going the way that she had hoped. Jessica then grabbed Cody and walked through exactly why the other side of the house might flip the votes onto Ramses and keep Josh in the game. Jessica was completely right about everything she was saying. It was all in the palm of her hands, and she still chose to not use the veto, and she left Ramses on the block. Of course, Paul did in fact flip the votes onto Ramses and blindside him come eviction night, proving everything that had been right in front of Jess's face all week long. Had Jess used the veto on Ramses and nominated literally anybody else, then Josh would have been evicted, she would earn Ramses' loyalty, and she would actually have a shot to regain some power in the house due to her halting hex. But instead, she didn't use it, and everything that could have gone wrong did. Josh survived the vote, everybody turned against her and Cody once again, and she had just sent home the only player left in the house that was actually willing to work with her. It's one of the worst veto holds of all time, but I am so glad it happened because it allowed Josh to survive and become one of my favorite players ever.
I would prefer to leave noms the same, but if I talk to people and have any kind of sense that you're in danger, I will use it and pull you off.
I need to ensure that Josh is the one going home.
Is everyone on board with Josh going out? Should be. You're gonna vote him out? Big time. I can't vouch for everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I think so.
I don't know how I feel about that. I'm getting really paranoid about the vote. If I was on the other side of the house, keep everybody calm till votes happen, send home Ramses. Ramses they can't control, Josh they can. All they need me to do is not use the veto.
I have decided not to use the power of veto.
That was the worst move ever! I get that you don't want to stir the pot, but at least make a solid move.
By a vote of 7-3, Josh, you are safe. Ramses, you are evicted from the Big Brother house.
Up next, we have one that I can kind of understand on one hand, but I still think it was a big mistake. And that's when Zach chose not to use the veto at the Final 5 of Big Brother 8, which allowed both Donatos to enter the Final 4 together. Going into the Final 5 double eviction, Eric was clearly the biggest jury threat left in the house, but the pair of Dick and Danielle were competitive monsters that posed a very big roadblock towards actually making it to the Final 2. Dick won the Final 5 HOH and nominated Eric and Jameka, but Zach then went out and won the veto and was put in a very interesting position. If Zach used the veto to save either of the nominees, then Dick would be forced to nominate his daughter Danielle, and she would have been evicted before the Final 4. This would put Zach in a really good spot, as not only would his path to the end be easier, but he'd also be playing with a huge advantage. Eric and Jameka were not great at competitions, so Zach was going to be the favorite to win all the power in the endgame, and his plan was to take Dick to the final 2 and beat him in a jury vote. Even if Dick beat Zach in the final HOH, I think Dick would have brought Zach to the final 2 now, as he knew he couldn't beat Eric or Jameka, so Zach would have been in a prime position to win the game. However, instead of making a fancy move at the final 5, Zach chose not to use the veto, allowing Danielle to make it to the final 4, and Eric was evicted instead. Now, I get why Zach may have wanted Eric out, because Eric was legitimately the biggest threat to win in the end, and Zach would have beaten both Danielle and Dick in the final 2. However, by getting rid of Eric, Zach worsened the odds of himself even making it to the final 2. With Danielle still in the game, Dick was never going to take Zach to the final 2. And on top of that, Danielle was extremely good at competitions, which was quickly proven once she won the final 4 veto. So instead of Zach going to the final 3 with Dick and one of Jameka or Eric, he was in the final 3 with Dick and Danielle. And in this timeline, when Dick beat Zach in the final HOH, he didn't take Zach to the end because Danielle was still in the house. Had Zach used that veto at the final 5, he would have put himself in a great spot to win the game, whether he earn it himself or be taken to the end. But because he decided to hold it instead, he decreased his own chances of making it to the final 2, and he paid the price once Dick evicted him in 3rd place.
And Zach is the winner. Congratulations, Zach. You have won the Power of Veto.
I got the POV. I could totally upset the game. I could really get one of the Donatos out of this game. At the last second, I said, I'd really like to use it, but I'm not. I'm not going to use it. I made an oath to my group. I've got to keep them one more time in hopes that I can win.
Congratulations, Dick. You are the final head of household.
There is no decision. Zach, you're out. Me and you, Danielle, we won this whole thing. It's done.
For this next one, we're going back to Big Brother 19, and I'm going to choose a veto hold that you can point to as the single moment that lost the game for a particular player. And that's when Paul didn't use the veto on Alex at the final 5 of Big Brother 19. Now, admittedly, I am kind of cheating with this one because hindsight is 20/20, of course, but just roll with me for a little bit. This is the moment that sealed Paul's fate in the game. Going into the final 5, Alex thought that she had a final 2 deal with Paul, but Paul had final 2s with everyone else too, and since Alex was the biggest threat left in the game, Paul wanted her gone this round. Josh won the HOH and nominated Alex and Kevin for eviction, and then Paul went out and won the veto. Alex expected Paul to use the veto to try and save her and keep them both safe for the week, but Paul was actually straight up with her and told her that she was a lock to win if she was in the final 2, so Paul couldn't use the veto because they'd be practically handing her the money. So Paul didn't use the veto, and Alex was evicted in 5th place. Now here's the thing. Getting rid of Alex was probably something Paul needed to do for their game, and I think they actually managed her pretty well when they explained why they had to do it. However, Paul actually needed to wait 1 or 2 rounds before making the move, and here's why. Paul didn't know it yet, but the jury was furious with them, and they already had 4 guaranteed votes against them. So, based off that math, Paul needed every other vote to fall their way in order to win. And as it stood, Paul actually had all of those votes, including Alex's. But by tossing Alex away this round, Alex felt extremely betrayed by Paul, and it left a sour taste in her mouth as she left the house. Then, adding fuel to the fire, Alex was able to further compare notes with everyone at the jury house and join in on the pact to vote against Paul, leading to Paul's 5-4 defeat in the end. But had Paul used the veto to save Alex and waited until the final 4 or the final 3 to send her home, they may have been able to salvage her vote. For those that don't know, I'm pretty sure that the player that goes out at the final 5 is actually the last player that gets to go to the jury house and spend a lot of time with the other jurors. The final 4 evictee gets to join the other jurors for the jury roundtable with Dr. Will, but that's not for very long, and afterwards, the jurors get sequestered until the finale. So, had Paul used the veto to save Alex and taken her out at Final 4, or ideally Final 3, then it's possible that Alex simply doesn't have the time to join the jury pact against Paul. Also, telling someone you're voting them out because they're a threat to win feels a lot more justifiable at the final 3 than at the final 5. So I think there's a slight chance that even if Alex does feel burned by Paul, she might still vote for them to win if it happened at the very end of the game. Basically, all I'm trying to say is that Paul desperately needed Alex's jury vote if they wanted to win the game, and there were certainly paths that existed where Paul could have secured that vote and still made it to the end against Josh. But by not using the veto on Alex, her jury vote started floating away, and after being sent to the jury house with the rest of the anti-Paul crew, it all but ensured that Alex's vote would go to whoever was sitting next to Paul.
So it kind of sucks because I did win the veto, but Paul wins it, and it's even better because now he can pull me off the block and we'll both be safe for the week.
I'd rather be honest with her about it now than screw her over at the very end.
I think that if I use the veto on you, I'm pretty much throwing my game in the trash.
Really?
If I make this move, I lose. But if I don't, I think that I actually have a chance to win this year.
I'm sorry, I feel like I listened to everything you said, and now it's just like...
Paul can say whatever he wants, but if I was in the same position as him, I wouldn't have screwed Paul, ever. Friend, you wouldn't be here without me, and you shot me in the back.
Paul, we all know that if you leave me on the block, I'm dead in the water. So I'm asking you one last time to use the power of veto on me.
I'm sorry that I let you down this week, but I choose not to use the power of veto.
Sitting here right now, how do you feel about Paul?
I think he played a really shady game.
He pulled me into a room and he said, I can't ruin my jury votes.
We'll show you your jury votes, pal.
Alex has cast her vote for Josh.
And lastly, to close things off, we have the one everyone's been waiting for. The single worst veto hold in all of Big Brother was when Marcellas didn't use the veto on himself at the final 5 of Big Brother 3. Going into the final 5, Jason had won the HOH, and Danielle wanted to target Marcellas. Not only because Marcellas ratted Danielle out to Roddy earlier in the game, but because Marcellas was just a big threat in general. He had a great shot at winning that Final 4 HOH, and he had amazing win equity if he were to be sitting in the final 2 chairs. So, Danielle recognized that this might be their last chance to get rid of Marcellas. Jason nominated Marcellas next to Amy, and things were looking good to blindside him. But then, Danielle's hopes and dreams were crushed once Marcellas won the golden power of veto. This was actually the first time all season long that the veto winner had the ability to save themselves from the chopping block. Before this, you actually weren't allowed to use the veto on yourself. So of course, Marcellas wins, the only veto all season long that would actually keep himself safe. But in a position where Marcellas should have been guaranteed safety, he started thinking differently. You see, Marcellas was convinced that everyone in the house wanted Amy gone, not him, and Danielle worked hard to manipulate Marcellas and make him feel as safe as possible. Marcellas was also having a hard time making what he considered to be a selfish move. By using the veto on himself, then one of his friends, in Lisa or Danielle, would be nominated in his place. Even though it looked like the easiest decision in the world from the outside, it was anything but for Marcellas. When eviction night approached, Marcellas had a decision to make, and to the shock of millions, Marcellas made the noble move and didn't use the veto. He didn't want Jason to have to pick between Lisa and Danielle, and he didn't want one of them to have to go up on the block in his place. So since he figured that Amy was being evicted no matter what, why not be selfless and keep his friends out of harm's way? It was certainly a noble gesture in a cutthroat game, but, well, that's exactly it. At the end of the day, it's a cutthroat game. And Marcellas was about to learn firsthand the harsh truth of what that meant. Although Lisa did vote for Marcellas to stay, Jason and Danielle had other plans. Danielle voted to evict Marcellas, which forced a tie between the two, and Jason finished the job by evicting him. Marcellas, you should have used the veto.
Congratulations, Marcellas. You have the golden veto.
Dang, that fool wants to stay in the house.
I can take myself off the block if I choose to. It's the ultimate immunity.
He thinks he can honestly beat Amy. If Marcellas does not use the golden veto, I'm afraid Marcellas will leave Big Brother.
I've played this game looking out for other people. They're sitting at home and they're like, use the veto, fool! I'm not gonna use it. I don't want you to have to decide between them. I don't want you guys to go through the moment that I went through this week.
I vote to evict Marcellas.
As harsh and as terrible as it is, you should have used the veto. I'm sorry, but I vote to evict you, Marcellas.
Marcellas, you are now evicted from the Big Brother house. First of all, Marcellas, I need to do this to you.
Oh,
no! What were you thinking?
And there we go. Players often get worried that using the veto might rock the boat too much in the house and put a target on their back. But sometimes you just gotta face things head on and do what's best for your game. Especially if you're sitting on the block. But hey, shit happens. And at the end of the day, it is just a game. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I, of course, need to give that extra special shout out to all of my YouTube members and patrons who would never, ever make the mistake of holding onto a veto that they should use. And, as always, here's a clip for you on your way out.
Just doesn't use the veto on Ramsey or myself, so... You're getting blindsided, baby, and you think that you're getting me out the door? Oh, baby girl, you're highly confused, boo-boo.